what's up? It's your friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man here, coming at you with another ASMR session, because the mic in this camera sucks. So firstly, this is my main bass. This is my Chapman MLB. It was the original MLBs that they put out a few years ago, and I believe they were only out for maybe a year or so before they were recalled. The body is made of Bubinga, and I don't believe that you can sell guitars made of Bubinga anymore, which is, I imagine, why it was stopped. But it is such a beautiful bass, and I use it for pretty much everything now. The body is now quite worn down. You can see pick marks and like sweat marks, and like especially around the edges here, all of the varnish is pretty much gone, but it's just a sign it's been loved. I'm really regretting using this massive Ashdown stealth mic now. So you've just got standard Chapman humbucker pickups in this, but it does also have the coil tap, which is beautiful. You just raise that knob there, and that's really, it gives a really good slap tone. It gives that little extra high end, that little extra sparkle. You've also got two volume knobs, one for each pickup. You've got the pickup select, and you've also got the tone as well. So you've got quite a lot of options to dial in some chunky, funky tone. You've also got 24 frets in case that you want to go. And secondly, we've got my second Chapman here. This is the Chapman MLB1 Pro, which was the reissue of the Chapman MLB, this time with, I believe, a walnut body, and it's very similar specs to the other Chapman. It's got a very similar sound, I would say, but this one is a little better for, like, it's a little bit of towards the funkier side of the spectrum. So the other one's a little further towards the chunkier side of the spectrum. This one's probably about 70% funky, 30% chunky, and compared to the 70-30 split, the opposite side for the other bass. So as much as the tuning really disagrees with it, I do use quite thin strings on these basses, just because it's what I prefer to play with. So I use the Ernie Ball hybrid Slinky on these, which I believe is 45 to 105 millimeters, and it's pretty much perfect, to be honest, apart from the fact that, if you're tuning as low as drop C for some of our songs, like Civility Smiles is in drop C, then you're gonna get a little bit of detuning when you're going for those, like, big open notes on the low E. So I'm considering just going for it and getting five string packs and just putting the low B as my E instead, so it can just hold that tuning a little bit better. Apart from that, I do really love the thinner strings on the basses. So this is my Darkglass Microtubes 500 head. I've had this for a couple of years now, after moving on from the Ashdown Rootmaster 220. It's the king of tone. This thing is actually just ridiculous. The fact that it's got two Darkglass pedals built in is just this little added bonus, and I feel like I really don't take advantage of that as much as I really should be. My settings are pretty standard. I do like my gain a little higher, just to get that little extra crunch on the input. I'll usually have my bass and my low mids quite low, just purely because the cab that I use is super bassy and it's super low end, and it's got this lovely warm tone, but it does mean that you need to dial back the bass and the low mids quite a bit to get it to stand out a bit more. Similarly, I've got the high mids and the treble up quite high to counteract that as well. As for the B3K and the VMT settings you've got down here, you've got the drive, the tone, the level, and the blend, just similarly to the basic controls on an actual B3K or VMT pedal. And I've got it pretty low. I've got the drive pretty low. As I said, I use that as a little bit of a crunch for most of the clean parts. And then tonally and levels wise and blend, I just want it just sitting there nicely in the middle. I do actually rely on my cab for a lot of the tone as well, which I unfortunately don't have with me today because that is also in the unit. It does have this nice warm tone that I do love. So I've also got the Korg Pitchblack tuner that Craig's got. I've had that for about 10 years now or something, and it's still going, bar slightly wobbly button that I need to adjust every now and then. I've also got a bass whammy here, similarly to Craig, the Digitech whammy. I generally just use this in the octave down setting for chunky riffs mostly, and then occasionally I'll go to the octave up setting for more ambient stuff and combine that with like the Tera Echo and maybe the Hall of Fame. So next up I've got the Darkglass B3K. This is a great pedal. I use almost all Darkglass stuff for all my tones, and I mostly use this just for my main distortion, more of a sort of crunchy distortion than anything else, just to back up the guitars, and I'll have that on about 3/4 of the set at least. I've also got a B3K on built in to my head as well, and then next up I've got the Darkglass Alpha Omega. This is like just the chunkiest pedal that you could possibly imagine. It's technically two pedals in one. So you've got the alpha side, and you've got which is over here, and you've got the omega side, which is over there. I like doing maybe about mostly omega for our sound, mixed in with a bit of the alpha, but I used a lot of the alpha sound for the album. I just felt it worked a lot more, so these settings will likely all be changing by the time we're touring again. And then next up I've got the MXR bass envelope filter. This thing was I just always wanted an envelope filter, and I had no idea where to fit it in. So I had this for a while before it actually made it onto my board, just because it didn't fit in any part. But I've been using it for a few funky bits here and there. I use it in Knees Crushed by an Electric Circus, which we don't play as much anymore, and one of our newer songs as well, and it's just got a nice little. And then my next two pedals are actually guitar pedals, because the secret's out, I used to be a guitar player before I was a bass player, and this pedal is just, I use this for all my noise, all my ambience, everything. It's just such a fantastic delay pedal. It's got a very underwater sound, I guess you could say. It's like very bubbly, and it's a very nice little delay pedal. And then lastly, this is a pedal I've had for so long, and I've only just actually put it onto my boards just to add on to the ambience. Just a nice little Hall of Fame mini, and it's so basic that it's a wee one knob dude. Just a little bit of extra ambience just to smooth out the Tera Echo here. And then lastly, I've also got this Footswitch as well, the super intelligent Footswitch made by Darkglass. Some say it's even more intelligent than its user, myself. And you've got 4 settings on there. I mean, you've just got the clean, which is no effects, obviously. You've got the VMT, which is a vintage Microtubes, which is based after the Darkglass vintage Microtubes pedal, which is meant to sort of emulate like old tube amps, like distortion of old tube amps and like reel-to-reel machines. And then, which I don't use a lot. I don't find it fits into with their sound a ton, but it's nice for a little crunch here and there. And then next up you've got the another B3K there, which I just use as an extra level of distortion. I use that for mostly my cleans, to be honest. I'll use that instead of the clean channel, just so that it stands out just a little bit more, and I'll have the distortion or the drive on it just super low. And then lastly, you've just got a mute here, which it's handy to have an extra mute that isn't your tuner, I guess. Yeah, so I'm still to make the jump to the octa switch like Craig has. So I'm still dancing all over my pedal boards like he talked about. And it also means that I don't have a set 8 presets like Craig's got. But I have kind of categorised all my different sounds. So my first one is just my main distortion, which is just my B3K pedal by itself. Wee bit of drive, and on the grunt setting, just for that extra thickness. And then next up is like my next stage of distortion, I guess, which I use for all my chunky riffs. But not too chunky, let's not take it too far now. But, you've just got the Alpha Omega there, which is just tasty. And then next up is for like the super chunky, the creme de la chunky, and then that's the Alpha Omega and the Whammy down. Taking it back a step, it's just my plain old crunch, which is a B3K on the amp, which is more of a, I use it more for the cleans, as I said, than for actual crunch itself. And then next up, continuing with the theme of just different levels of distortion, we've got the Trider Crunch, which is the VMT. Pretty much the only part I use this for at the moment is for the crunchy part in Trider, just because the 9/8 bridge in Trider, just because the B3K is just a little bit, it's got a little bit too much low end for that, whereas I just want all crunch and no bunch. And then next up is my favourite sounds or collection of sounds on my board, which is just my ambience sounds, which is my Whammy, an octave up, my B3K, or occasionally my B3K crunch, considering how spicy I'm feeling, and then my Tera Echo and my Hall of Fame as well. And it's just a nice little synthy ambience, I guess you could say. And then next up I've got my funky sound, which I use for the occasional thing, which is my B3K, my Whammy up, and my bass envelope filter. And then lastly, I lied about the ambience being the best sound in my board. This is the best sound in my board. The noise sound, which is just every single pedal turned on and just fucking with this time knob. So this board's actually going to be changing quite a bit by the time that we start touring again. I used a bunch of different pedals other than the ones on this board, and a bunch of different settings other than the one on this board for the album, and I'm just in the process of trying to transfer that over to a live sound at the moment. So this board will be pretty much completely different by the time that we're gigging again. This B3K is going to get swapped out for a B7K Ultra after Jake from Triptych lent me his for the recording of the album, and it's difficult to go back to the B3K after using the B7K. It's quite a nice little step up, and it gives you a lot of extra options. So I hope you've enjoyed Rig Rundowns. As Craig said, it is something we've wanted to do for a while. So thank you to the people that requested that. If there is anything else you want to see, any more playthroughs or anything, just hit us up. Or if I've inevitably missed about 1,000 things about my gear, please tell me. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Hope that you've enjoyed. I hope that you're staying safe and doing whatever it is that makes you happy, or whether that's making tunes or gardening or Netflix binging, eating toast. Maybe that's your thing. Maybe you've just been eating toast the whole quarantine. So it's a good hobby. So yeah, hit us up with your toast picks, and we'll catch you on the flippity flop.